Deep in the Mexican jungle, mercenaries are drilling into a forbidden temple. Inside lies the Time Mirror, an artifact that doesn't show your face, but your deepest regret. It offers Jake a chance to rewrite history and save his dead wife. But the price of saving her is erasing the son standing right beside him. When the past calls, how do you choose who lives? The garage was a sanctuary of dust and memories, filled with the sharp metallic scent of ozone and old engine oil. It had been a full year since the ordeal in the Arizona desert, and life for Jake and his family had settled into a quiet, almost comfortable rhythm. At 43, Jake moved with the deliberate slowness of a man who had fought too many battles. He stood by a cluttered workbench, wiping grease from his calloused hands with a stained rag, watching the dust motes dance in the afternoon sun. Across the room sat his son, Leo. At 16, the boy had changed. He had grown tall and lean, shedding the softness of childhood for the angular frame of a runner. He wore heavy headphones, his fingers flying across a keyboard as he calibrated the flight stability of a new, rugged drone he had built from scrap parts. Between them lay Wolf. The German Shepherd was now 6 years old, in the absolute prime of his life. His silver and gray coat was thick and immaculate. He appeared to be sleeping on the cool concrete floor, but his ears swiveled like radar dishes, tracking the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a car on the highway. The peace was not broken by an explosion, but by a sound that made Jake's blood run cold. A shrill, persistent electronic warble erupted from the dark corner of the garage. Wolf was on his feet instantly, a deep, protective growl rumbling in his chest as he faced the source of the noise. Jake dropped his wrench, the metal clanging loudly on the floor. They both looked at the dusty black server tower sitting in the corner, a piece of advanced equipment Ilara had left behind, which had sat silent and dark for over a decade. Leo pulled his headphones off, his eyes wide. He rushed to the terminal, his hands shaking slightly as he typed in a command sequence. "Dad," he said, his voice deepening with concern, "this is not a calendar notification. This is a proximity alert. It is a failsafe." A window popped open on the dusty monitor. A video file began to play automatically. The face of Ilara appeared. She looked younger than Jake remembered, her eyes tired but filled with a fierce determination. "Jake?" her voice echoed in the silent garage, hitting him like a physical blow. "If this system triggers, it means the physical shielding at Site X7 has been breached. It means someone is drilling through the containment wall." Jake leaned in, placing a hand on the desk to steady himself. "The time mirror inside is not a treasure," Ilara continued, her voice urgent. "It is a stabilizer for a temporal rift. I hid it to keep the timeline safe. But if they force it open without the biosignature key, it will not just open a door. It will collapse the present reality. You have to destroy the core, Jake. It is the only way to be safe." A set of coordinates flashed red on the screen. The Lacandon Jungle, Mexico. "We have to go," Leo said, standing up straight. "No," Jake said, his voice hard and final. "I am going. You are staying here. It is too dangerous." "You cannot get in without me," Leo argued, stepping forward to match his father's gaze. "It requires a biosignature. You share half her DNA, but the system might need a prime match. And I know her code, Dad. You know how to fight, but I know how to solve this." Wolf looked between the two men, sensing the rising tension. He moved to stand beside Leo, leaning his heavy weight against the boy's leg, offering silent support. Jake looked at his son. He searched for the little boy he used to hide, but he only saw a young man ready to defend his mother's legacy. He let out a long, resigned breath. "Pack your gear. We leave in an hour." The heat of the Chiapas rainforest was a physical weight, a heavy, wet blanket that pressed down on them with humid green hands. They had been hiking for 6 grueling hours. The air was thick with the smell of rotting vegetation and wet earth. Leo paused to check his rugged tablet, wiping a stream of sweat from his eyes. The thick canopy of ancient trees above blocked out the sky, plunging the jungle into a perpetual emerald twilight. "We are close," Leo whispered, his voice barely audible over the buzzing of insects. The seismic readings are spiking. The drilling is causing tremors. Jake raised a clenched fist, signaling a stop. He crouched low, his cargo pants stained with mud, his eyes scanning the dense undergrowth. Wolf froze beside him. The dog's nose twitched, testing the heavy air. Slowly, the hair along Wolf's spine stood up, a silent, primal warning. "Soldiers," Jake murmured. Leo nodded and quietly launched his small, black drone. It buzzed silently up through the trees like a large insect disappearing into the leaves. On his tablet screen, thermal images began to appear. "There," Leo pointed at the screen, 300 yards ahead. A large excavation camp had been cut violently into the jungle floor. Men in dark tactical gear were moving around heavy machinery that was grinding against a massive, moss-covered stone structure. "That is Cale's outfit," Jake said, his jaw tightening as he recognized the insignia on a tent. "Mercenaries. They are not archaeologists. They are demolition experts. They are trying to brute force the door." "There are too many of them," Leo whispered, looking at the heat signatures that blocked their path. "We can't fight through that." "We do not engage," Jake commanded softly. "We are not here to fight a war. We are here to disable the device before they breach it." Wolf suddenly turned his head to the left towards a dense, intimidating wall of vines and thorny brush. He looked back at Jake, then let out a soft release of air through his nose. "Wolf found a path," Jake said, trusting the dog implicitly. "Move low and quiet. If they see us, the mission is over." They slipped into the undergrowth, moving like ghosts. Jake guided Leo on where to step to avoid snapping dry twigs, while Wolf led them through a hidden animal trail. The path was tight and difficult, winding through the roots of massive trees, but it bypassed the entire mercenary perimeter. Finally, they emerged at the forgotten, vine-choked rear of the temple ruin, unseen and unheard. The rear entrance was barely a crack in the limestone, hidden behind a curtain of water that cascaded down the temple walls. They squeezed through the gap, entering a cool, damp corridor that smelled of stagnant water and centuries of undisturbed dust. The roar of the waterfall outside faded to a dull hum. "This is the ventilation shaft Mom marked," Leo said, turning on his tactical flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a dead end. A massive circular stone door blocked their path. It was covered in intricate, terrifying Maya carvings of jaguars and stars. "It is a lock," Leo said, kneeling to examine it. He pulled a cable from his pack and connected his tablet to a hidden port concealed under a loose stone. "Not mechanical, astronomical." "Cale is drilling through the front," Jake said, checking his watch and looking back down the tunnel. "We have minutes before they break through." Leo's fingers worked furiously across the screen, translating the glyphs using Alara's database. "It aligns with the cycle of Venus," he muttered to himself. He stood up and pressed a series of stone tiles on the door in a specific rhythmic sequence. The wall groaned. Dust fell from the ceiling as ancient counterweights shifted. The stone door began to roll open with a grinding sound. But as it moved, a deep, rushing noise echoed from deep within the walls, like a roaring river approaching. Wolf barked wildly, a sharp, echoing sound of panic. He bit at Jake's sleeve and pulled him back hard. "Water!" Leo yelled, looking up. A hidden sluice gate opened in the ceiling above them. A torrent of dark, pressurized water erupted into the corridor. It was a trap designed to wash away grave robbers. "Up, climb!" Jake shouted, shoving Leo toward a high stone ledge. Thanks to Wolf's split-second warning, they scrambled up the rough wall just as the floodwaters swept through the space where they had been standing. The water churned violently below them, dark and angry, carrying away loose rocks and debris with bone-crushing force. "Hydraulics," Leo breathed, shaking as he shone his light on the rushing water below. The ancients used the underground river as a defense system. "Smart," Jake said, his heart racing. He reached out and patted Wolf's wet head. "Good boy. Let's keep moving before the water rises higher." They moved deeper into the belly of the temple, and the air grew colder, vibrating with a low, rhythmic thrumming sound. What lay before them was not a burial chamber, but a marvel of ancient industrial engineering. They stepped out onto a narrow stone walkway suspended high above a massive, cavernous void. Below them, a subterranean river roared, its dark waters channeled through sluices to power a series of colossal stone gears, some as large as houses. Bronze counterweights, green with age but still functional, swung like pendulums in the gloom. The entire temple was a living, breathing machine designed to protect the time mirror at its heart. "It is a clock," Leo whispered, his voice filled with awe as he scanned the complex system of levers and pulleys. A water-powered astronomical clock. It controls the entire layout of the temple. Suddenly, a violent tremor shook the walkway, nearly knocking them off their feet. Dust rained down from the vaulted ceiling. A deafening explosion echoed from the entrance tunnel behind them, drowning out the roar of the water. "They blew the blast doors," Jake said, his face grim. He gripped his rifle tighter, pushing Leo behind him. "Move, faster." Voices began to echo from the lower levels, harsh and shouting. Beams of high-powered tactical flashlights cut through the gloom below like searching lightsabers, sweeping across the ancient machinery. Kyle's men were inside, and they were moving fast. "Up there! Movement on the gantry!" a mercenary shouted from below. A bullet sparked against the stone railing near Jake's hand. "Go!" Jake yelled, shoving Leo forward. They sprinted along the wet, slippery stone bridge. The path wound through the spinning gears, a perilous gauntlet where one slip meant being crushed by tons of grinding stone. Wolf stayed low, his claws scrabbling for traction on the mossy rock, barking warnings whenever a flashlight beam swept too close. "There!" Leo pointed, breathless. Across the vast cavern, a final, wider bridge led to a heavy bronze door, the entrance to the central chamber. But they weren't the only ones heading for it. A second squad of mercenaries had rappelled down from a breach in the upper wall and was rushing toward the same bridge from the opposite side. They were heavily armed and had a clear line of sight. "We can't outrun them to the bridge," Jake assessed, pulling Leo behind the cover of a massive limestone pillar. "They will cut us off before we reach the door." Leo looked around frantically. His eyes didn't search for cover. They searched for a solution. He looked at the enemies, then up at the massive, spinning primary gear that drove the bridge's mechanism. He saw a heavy bronze chain connected to a counterweight suspended directly above the mercenaries' path. "Dad, cover me!" Leo yelled. "Leo, stay down!" But the boy didn't listen. He scrambled out of cover, pulling a heavy iron pry bar from his tactical pack. He wasn't running away. He was running toward the machinery. "Leo!" Jake roared, firing suppressive shots at the approaching soldiers to buy his son time. Leo reached the base of the primary gear. The teeth of the stone wheel were moving with unstoppable torque. He waited for the rhythm, his teenage face set in deep concentration, calculating the physics in a split second. "Drop the weight, close the gate," he muttered. With a grunt of effort, Leo threw the heavy iron bar directly into the meshing teeth of the main drive gear. Crunch. The sound was sickening, metal screaming against stone. The bar caught. The massive gear shuddered and groaned, grinding to a violent halt. Sparks showered down into the darkness. The sudden stop triggered the fail-safe mechanism Leo had predicted. The chain above the bridge snapped. A massive stone slab weighing tons slammed down from the ceiling, crashing onto the bridge with earth-shattering force. It smashed into the walkway exactly between Jake's group and the mercenaries, creating an impenetrable wall of rock. The soldiers on the other side shouted in confusion and rage, their path completely blocked. Leo slumped against the wall, panting, his hands shaking from the adrenaline. Jake ran to him, checking him for injuries. He looked at the massive wall, then at his son. There was no anger in his eyes, only pride. "That was dangerous," Jake said, breathless. "It worked," Leo managed a weak smile. "Yeah," Jake helped him up. "It worked. Now let's finish this." The central chamber was bathed in an ethereal, pulsing blue light. In the center of the room stood the time mirror, a large, polished surface of dark obsidian crystal, suspended in a bronze frame that hummed with power. The planetary alignment was complete, and the device was active. Jake stepped forward slowly, drawn by the light. He looked into the dark surface. He expected to see his reflection, but instead the surface rippled like water. The image cleared. He saw a street. It was raining. He saw a car. Ilara's car. The windshield wipers were moving. He could see her profile. It was 11 years ago. The pull was hypnotic. It was overwhelming. He felt that if he just reached out, he could tap on the glass. He could warn her. He could tell her to turn left instead of right. "Dad?" Leo's voice sounded far away, muffled by the hum of the machine. "I can save her," Jake whispered, his hand reaching toward the surface. "I can fix it." "Jake!" A new voice cut through the air, sharp and commanding. Kyle, the mercenary leader, had found a service ladder and climbed up to their level. He stood on the opposite side of the chamber. He had his weapon raised, but he was not firing. He saw what Jake was looking at. "Do it," Kyle said, his voice smooth and persuasive. "I know what this machine does. Change the past. Bring her back. I don't care about the history or the timeline. I just want the energy core once you are done. We both win, Jake." Jake looked at the image of his wife. She was alive. She was smiling. The pain of missing her crashed into him like a tidal wave, drowning out reason. "Dad," Leo said again, stepping closer. He didn't sound scared. He sounded sad. "If you change that night, if she lives, everything changes, including me." Jake froze. The air in the room seemed to stop. He looked at the reflection of the past, at the woman he loved more than life. Then he turned to look at his son in the present, 16 years old, brave, intelligent, and real. "If you rewrite the past," Leo said softly, tears in his eyes, "you might erase the future." The temple began to shake violently. The energy in the mirror was becoming critical, spiraling out of control. Jake looked at Ilara's face in the mirror one last time. It was a goodbye he never got to say. Then he looked at Leo. He saw Ilara's eyes in his son. She hadn't died for him to undo it. She had died to ensure this boy had a future. "She is already here," Jake said, his voice breaking as he placed a hand on Leo's shoulder. "She lives in you." He turned to Kale, his eyes hardening. "No deal." Jake raised his rifle, but not at Kale. He aimed at the delicate crystal supports holding the mirror. He fired. Crack! The supports shattered. The massive obsidian disc crashed to the stone floor, fracturing into 1,000 pieces. The blue energy exploded outward, a shockwave that knocked everyone to the ground. "You fool!" Kyle screamed, trying to shield his face as the unstable energy backlash hit the temple's structural supports. The floor beneath them began to crack and tilt dangerously. "The water!" Leo yelled, pointing to the drainage grates bursting open along the walls. The explosive decompression blew the seals. The floor gave way completely, turning the room into a massive wet slide. "Jump!" Jake commanded. He grabbed Leo, and Wolf leaped after them. They slid down the collapsing stonework into the rushing underground river below. The cool, dark water swallowed them instantly. The current was immense, pulling them through a submerged tunnel at breakneck speed. Jake held on to Leo tight, kicking hard, holding his breath until his lungs burned. The darkness was absolute. Just as blackness threatened to take him, he saw a faint glow ahead. They burst out of the underwater tunnel, launching into the air and splashing down into a deep, sunlit cenote, a natural jungle sinkhole open to the sky. They surfaced, gasping for air, coughing up water. Above them, the ground rumbled deeply as the temple collapsed into itself, burying Kale and the fragments of the time mirror forever under tons of rock and water. They swam to the limestone edge. Jake pulled Leo up, then hauled a wet, panting Wolf onto the dry rock. They sat there, shivering but alive, bathed in the warm Mexican sun. "We did it," Leo whispered, looking at his father with a new understanding. "Yeah," Jake said, pulling his son into a tight hug. "We saved the future." Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't holding on, but letting go. Jake had the power to change the past, but he realized that his true world was the son standing beside him. If this story about choosing the future over the past touched your heart, please like this video and share your thoughts below. Your support helps our journey continue. We invite you to subscribe because the adventure isn't over. The next chapter is waiting for you on the screen.